Thanks, John. He's so right, we don't know. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm an alcoholic, member of Alcoholics Anonymous. My home group is the Mountain Group down in Fort Lauderdale, and my name is Tommie Dayton. Hi. Why am I here? When I get to a meeting like this, when I'm at a meeting, I ask me, why am I here? Why am I here? Hearing Renee read that part reminds me on the 4th of November, 1960, alcohol forsook me. I lost faith in it. And I've had to try through applying the steps inside of me where I believe my alcoholism is to find another spirit. I often think, excuse me, of Bill. Do you remember how you felt? Can we just maybe take a second or a few seconds and try to feel what we felt just before that surrender? Just before we knew we had to call AA, what it felt like. When that happened to Bill, he was in Akron, as you all know, I imagine. And he walked into that telephone booth because of the fear that he had. Somehow he knew, he didn't think, he knew that he had to reach a fellow alcoholic in order for him to not drink. And he made a telephone call. Wonder if you made one telephone call and you reached a live person or your intergroup office, or maybe you had to make 2 calls, I don't know. Broward County, we answer the phone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with a live voice. Nobody was there, he didn't get an answer. And Bill made a 2nd call and a 3rd call. I don't know about you, but I would not have persevered much beyond maybe a call and a half. And he made a 4th call and a 5th call. He made a 6th call and still no answer. I would not have been able to persevere. When he made the 7th call, Reverend Tunks answered, who got Bill in touch with Henrietta Seiberling, who got in touch with Ann Smith. So there were really 7, 8, 9, 10 calls. And it wasn't until the next day even. Now here's Bill wanting to drink. There wasn't a pamphlet. There wasn't a big book. There wasn't an AA number to call. There wasn't a coffee cup. But there was that fear that motivated Bill to continue to call until he reached a fellow alcoholic. That is awesome to me. You and I wouldn't be sitting here today if that hadn't happened. And when I think of the effort that went into this weekend, and I thank you, John, and everybody who's been on this committee, and you for being here, that'll have allowed Mary Jane and me to come and share with you, because without you, we wouldn't be here. All because of that fear that Bill had. What if Carl Jung hadn't been in touch with Roland? What if Roland hadn't passed it on to Ebby? What if Ebby hadn't passed it on to Bill? What if Bill hadn't passed it on to Dr. Bob? And on and on and on. Just what if? And I always like to think about that whenever we're given a privilege. What am I contributing to my recovery by trying to give it away? And I think it's pause, helps me to pause to think about, why am I here? And I'm here because I have a fatal illness. And I don't want to die from that illness. I want to continue in the recovering process that you have showed me the way to do. So I am so deeply grateful for being here. I know I'm grateful, I just pray I'm grateful enough. And I'm going to let Mary Jane do what she's going to do. Okay?
Thank you, Tommie.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I don't know if that's working or not. If I just bring it closer, maybe. Well, pardon? Is that any better? Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, John. Well, I think that's a wonderful place to start. My name is Mary Jane Roy, and I'm an alcoholic. And my home group is the Steps We Took, that meets on Tuesday and Wednesday in Narragansett, Rhode Island. On Tuesday night, we have a tradition, concept, and speaker meeting, and people stay away in droves. You know? And on Wednesday, we have a big book meeting, and it's wonderful. We have a great big book meeting. We just read a chapter. And this, if just for information, there's a group in town that does from cover to cover. They go from the first 164 pages and then through all of the stories and then start over again. But that's a very long time in the stories. And people come in, you know, and they just get story after story. The stories are wonderful. And some people had a problem with that. So another group started, and it's the 164 group. All they do is 164. When they get to the end of the meat and potatoes, they go back and start again. They miss all the stories. Our group decided we'd split the difference. We do 1 to 164 with the doctor's opinion and the appendices and the whole deal. And then we do the first batch of stories. Then we do the 164 again. And then we do the second batch of stories. And 164 again in the third batch. And it'll take us through about a year, and it works great. So just for information. Anyway, that's what our Wednesday night meeting is, and I have found that to be sustaining. And in addition to that, what I personally do is I go to the women's prison once a month, and I was working down at the intergroup office. Tommie does work at the intergroup office, and I noticed that the intergroup here was supporting this day. And my hat is off. You know, intergroup offices have been very, very significant and Jack, our buddy that was here last night, ran the Central Service Office in Rhode Island for a number of years. And I told you last night, my dad got sober in AA when I was 12 years old. But my mother and I knew people who worked at the Central Office. It was one story up because the rent was cheaper, and all it was a little, like a desk like this and a telephone. But you know, they did good work. And have you ever thought, like when you very first called AA, supposing nobody was there, supposing nobody answered the phone, supposing there wasn't any kind of a way to communicate? And it's staggering because we don't really have any official workers of any description. You know, we have the paid positions at the General Service Office in New York now, but in the beginning, gee, they just had Bill and Ruth Hawk and Nell Wing and some people like that who kept the thing afloat. But now we have some people who are pretty good at it. But the whole thing is essentially carried on from person to person. And isn't that amazing? And now it's all around the world, and our big book gets translated into Swahili, and you know, it's just amazing. But it doesn't happen automatically. And some of the comments that I've been hearing about last night and about today I think, have a lot to do with service and passing it on, and what's my responsibility here and all. And I'm sensing a lot of that going on with you guys. You really want to be of service and be helpful, but what do? Well, first, I guess, I'm trying to think of when I was the world's worst GSR. My first go-around, oh, geez, I was terrible. It was in Pennsylvania, and I was back at school, and I'd been sober over 10 years. But I'd lived out in the sticks. I didn't know what a GSR was. And I don't know about you, but if there's something I don't know, I just dummy up, you know. Oh, yeah, I know about that. You know? And I got elected GSR. I didn't even stand. But I went to my first district meeting, and they were hollering at each other and stuff. And this is just awful. I'm never going back there. And I went back one more time, and it was every bit as bad, only worse. And they were talking about how hard it was to get a job and stuff, but hollering at each other. And most of the people, it seemed to me like, worked in treatment, and I just thought it was awful. So I did what I always do: I just split. And it was another more than 10 years before when I finally moved back to Rhode Island, and I had a hard time connecting. I've moved a number of times, and it's always been very difficult for me to connect again, because I don't want to have to carve out my niche all over again, you know, and I don't know these people, and they talk funny, and they don't do it right anyways. And anyhow, I finally found a group that I really liked, and I settled in there. And one month, a lady came by for our business meeting, and she said that she was the district committee member for this District 7 in Rhode Island. And she said, this group doesn't have a general service representative, so we're making decisions for you. And that got my attention. I thought, really? You know? It was worth investigating to me. So I put it together, the whole GSR fiasco, but this lady saying that we were paying a price by not being connected in this other new experience. So I really wanted to be elected GSR at that point. And so I made myself available and got elected and went to the next district meeting, and it was a whole new thing. They'd changed everything. You know? But that was the beginning of a whole brand new, big experience for me, of opening up the world. Like AA didn't end at the corner of Elm and Maine, you know. It was way more to it, all the way around. And that was when I began to read more and put things together and see how the whole thing fit together. And it's overwhelming. First in misunderstandings, but then to begin to grasp the scope of things, you know, to start. And the thing is, a lot of people are waiting until they totally understand all of this before they'll get involved. And you never will on that basis. I think it'll never make sense until you go ahead and jump in and you say, yeah, I'll do that. And you go to a district meeting, and then you begin, oh, these people are from all the other groups that I already know about. I know some of these people. We're all from District 7, and we'll do some things that my group all by itself couldn't do because we don't have the resources, so we'll all get together. And besides what we can do in District 7, we'll be connected to all of AA in Rhode Island, and all of AA in Rhode Island is connected to all of AA in the United States and Canada, and wow. So, but but it'll never happen until you just make a decision to go ahead and jump in. And then it begins to fit together. And you will you'll make mistakes because you don't know everything. But I personally learn way more from my mistakes. I don't want to do that again, so I go home and read, you know. Besides a service manual for sleeping disorders, it does help you with arguments. That's, you know, somebody says something, you think, well, that can't be right. But so you go home and start reading up on things, and it begins to make sense. It begins to fit together. But I think that it's, I heard so much in the readings this morning about willingness, just willingness. I swear that's how we get well, is by willingness. And I think that that's the key to being active and effective in service. What is service? Anything that helps to carry this message to somebody who either needs it or might need it, or it's in their family or whatever, but to get the word out. The one thing that Tommie and I talked about, as far as not really knowing how to go about things here, what we would really like very much to do is to be responsive to what you were hoping for. So please, don't be reluctant to say, I was hoping to hear more about one thing or another, okay? Because we'll really try to do that. But the one thing that we did know about was and I'll tell you about Don. There's a guy, you may have heard of a guy named Don P. from Denver, Colorado. And he did a lot of workshops and was available to lots of people for lots of years. But the one thing that he developed was to start out something that has gotten labeled the set-aside prayer. And all in the world it is to say that when we come together as a group, something great is going to happen to a lot of us today just because we got together. That's what happens, We've come in a spirit of helpfulness and anticipation. We're looking forward to a day together. Something great will happen for many of us. And I don't think anything bad's going to happen to anybody, but some of us will benefit more. But it doesn't matter what stage of sobriety anyone who walked in the door is at. There's something here for each of us. And that's why the whole set aside, just park it. All of the prejudice and all of the baggage, just lay it aside and see if we can each have a new experience today. I mean, we really know what we've tapped into here. This is life-changing, life-saving stuff. And there's an opportunity here for each and every one of us to grow a little today and know what we're supposed to be doing with ourselves. I talked about Don Roy, my ex-husband, last night a little bit, but not enough, and because he really was a committed member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he had a lot of trouble, but he did an awful lot of good. And he started the intergroup, or revived the intergroup office, actually, over in Nashville. But not that long ago, a guy came to my home group meeting, and he was there as a guest of a friend of ours, Kevin, said, come on over to the meeting. And he wanted to meet me because he had heard that I was married to Don Roy. And I was excited to meet him. He was from Russia. And he brought his big book. And it was a soft cover big book. And he couldn't wait to show me the inscription. And inside it said, if you learn how to carry this message through our spiritual experience, you'll know what to do with the rest of your life. Don Roy. And I thought, son of a gun, this is 15 years after Don died. But tapes and influence that he had when he was living, I still see evidence of. But it's all about carrying this message. I really believe that. And I know people who go from workshop to workshop to workshop and become really, really acutely adept at workshops. But the whole deal is we gotta work with others. We gotta bring other folks along. If you've had the benefit of a workshop, then go home and find somebody that you can help, who didn't get to go to the workshop, And for me, the whole business of passing it on and carrying this message has just gotten more and more significant. When I hear myself talking to somebody else, I think, geez, I didn't even know I knew that. It makes it more real. And then I think, I even forgot I knew it, or that's what I need to do about this coming up. That you talk about that all the time, Tommie. When we're talking to somebody, it's what we really need to hear. And so I would hope that that's what we'll do today. I'm just going to read the set-aside prayer, and then I think what we probably ought to do is, as quick as we can, go through the steps, because that really is our recovery program. We can't hope to do real justice to the whole of the 12-step recovery program, but just as a review and just as a way to kind of anchor who we are and where we are and what we're about, we could maybe do a little a visit to our recovery program. And then we do want to talk about our traditions, because that's for the preservation and the health and well-being of Alcoholics Anonymous. And if we're not healthy and strong together and organized, in a way, not like General Motors, but like AA, because we got to have some kind of a sense of how we can work, but the traditions and an appreciation of what it is that we have here. And I don't know that we got to do much with the concepts other than to maybe pay homage or let people know that they are in place and where to find them and how to access all of that. But then about carrying this message, and then Tommie will do some history, and then we will try hard to be responsive to your requests and anything that you're interested in having talked about, anything you want to bring up, something that's been bothering you, something that's been helpful to you, whatever, if we can use this time to share together to all come away with something that we need. So I'm going to start with reading one version of what we call the set-aside prayer, so that we can all start together, no matter where we're coming from and no matter what's going on in any one person's life today. We can all benefit if we park some of our old ideas. God, please help me set aside everything I think I know about myself, my disease, these steps, and especially you, for an open mind and a new experience with myself, my disease, these steps, and especially you.
I have a switch. This is a tricky little thing. That set-aside prayer. Oh boy, that helps me to go from my head down to my heart somehow. because it's so easy for me to fall into that ego state that I think I'm in charge. And I sure am not. But that's part of the nature of my illness. And that prayer just helps me to kind of surrender to me, if you will. And in a sense, not in a sense, that's really why I drank alcohol. And the alcohol gave me permission to feel the feelings. And when I hear that set-aside prayer, it gets me out of my head and down into, deep down inside where the spiritual change has to be. I can't believe that can happen to a human being. Did you want to go over that part?
Do you want me to read the parts from the book?
How about that?
You know, there's nothing official about the set-aside prayer, and Don's intention never was to carve it on a plaque or anything, but some folks have found enough justification in the book to support it. On page 42, here's one sentence. It meant I would have to throw several lifelong conceptions out of the window. Page 46, we found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results, even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power, which is God. Page 47 says, do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you, so you can have a whole new experience with all of this. Page 48 is, besides a seeming inability to accept much on faith, we often found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy, sensitiveness, and unreasoning prejudice. It finally beat us into a state of reasonableness. Sometimes this was a tedious process. We hope no one else will be prejudiced for as long as some of us were. Page 49, we who have traveled this dubious path beg you to lay aside prejudice, even against organized religion. Page 58, some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go, absolutely. So first today, we're just kind of set aside, and this is a new day, and we'll see if we can have a new experience with this marvelous, incredibly wonderful recovery program that we have and the means to pass it on. Thanks.
So, I'll talk a little bit about the steps.
Steps?
I think that's why we're here. Step one, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. For a long time, because of the denial of this illness, I didn't know that I was an alcoholic. And I didn't know that I was really powerless over alcohol until the 4th of November, 1960 happened to be. And alcohol really forsook me. And I think that's why I honestly couldn't believe that I was an alcoholic, because it was doing something for me that I couldn't do for myself. You said I had a disease of denial. And how, if somebody said to us today, you have to stop believing in AA, what would you do? I couldn't do it. And so I couldn't stop drinking until I lost faith in alcohol, and that's happened that night. And I was able the next morning to be able to admit that, my God, I'm an alcoholic. That's what this has all been about. My life was unmanageable. Absolutely. Oh, it was terrible. Charlie wasn't home when I wanted him to be. The kids were arguing, and traffic lights would go red when I was in a hurry to get someplace. And that lady in front of me with all those coupons in the grocery store, and then something was missing something, and the clerk would have to go to the counter, and it was awful. My life was so unmanageable. All part of the emotional part of this illness. I truly believe that first step had everything to do with the physical aspect of my illness. You told me that I had a physical allergy to alcohol. And I think that's what admitted that I was powerless over alcohol was saying to me. And as I started then to implement the other steps in my life, and believe me, it didn't happen overnight. In fact, it was the slogans that kept me from drinking that first year. And I realized that the alcohol had been doing all the disciplining for me. I couldn't make any decisions for myself for a long, long time. But the alcohol made all the decisions for me. Told me what I could do and what I couldn't do. And it ended up just destroying me. So there was no problem once it forsook me, if you will, that I had any difficulty. I couldn't commit suicide. So, how much are you going to give up in order to find out that you are powerless over alcohol? As I began to implement the steps within me, I began to see where the unmanageability of my life was inside of me, where it led me right into the second step, came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. I didn't like that sanity business because I thought I was in pretty good shape, all part of the denial of the illness again. And somebody talked about, rather than insanity, how about insane behavior? Well, that wasn't hard, for me to discover, because indeed my behavior had been insane. Thinking that I was invisible and uptown in the mess that I was. I knew one man who thought that if he drank and took Librium, he would be invisible. And he could never understand why he always ended up in jail over the weekend. So there was no problem with the insanity part of that illness or the insane behavior. And I think it did have everything to do with the denial of my behavior. I couldn't look at some of that behavior until I got sober and started implementing the rest of the steps. And I think the second step came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. And the third step, I really believe, has to do with the third part of my illness, the spiritual bankruptcy. Because I got so angry at God because of my self-centeredness and wanting life on my terms, not as it was. I didn't realize until long after I came to you that I really thought that all I had to do was ask God for something and it would work. I was shocked when I'm not and found out I wasn't in charge. And I was so spiritually bankrupt by the time I got here because the spirit of alcohol had forsaken me. And once I stopped the drinking, fixed the physical part of the drinking part, I had two more parts of my illness. The emotional immaturity in the second step and the spiritual bankruptcy in the third step. And the remaining steps have eventually got me to a God of my understanding that have helped me to develop a spirit within that gives me the strength through error, you talk about mistakes. I was so embarrassed by mistakes because I thought mistakes were absolute failures. And you've taught me that mistakes are just my experience. My gosh, what a relief that was. We do such a terrible job on ourselves in beating us down for, I'll say, human behavior, but inappropriate when we add alcohol to it. And so we're learning to develop a new power greater than ourselves that allows us to accept life and experience life exactly where life is. Alcohol never changed what thought I was drinking over. Alcohol allowed me to feel and act on my reaction to life. And because it was alcohol and relieved the inhibitions that I had, I acted out many times inappropriately. So the spirit I'm finding within that third step made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. I began to find some strength that I was allowed to experience life exactly as life is. I can't believe that today. I'm fascinated by that. And so we discover ourselves, though the slogans helped me in the second step to I was going to say remove, but it didn't remove it. To help with the chaos in my life, to help with the guilt in my life, the remorse, all those feelings, part of my emotional immaturity, the way I acted them out. And I've done that through sponsorship. I have a beautiful sponsor today. But my first sponsor helped me that first year in just learning how not to drink through the slogans. We didn't even start the steps in those years, at least in my years, till I was sober maybe over a year when I met my second sponsor, who was Hazel from General Service Office in New York. And she died in my arms back in 1971. So sponsors not only teach you how to live, they also show you how to die, and what a gift she gave me, that's for sure. And so we're developing the surrender, if you will, that takes time. Surrender to who I was, who I am, and go from there, rather than trying to be somebody I'm not. And boy, I can slip into that, and I don't want you to really know who I am so quickly until I hear that set-aside prayer. And somehow it gets me right back to, why am I here? I'm here because I'm an alcoholic, and I have been willing to turn my will and my life not over to God, over to the care of God. And that just gives me a comfort, a warmth, incredible gift of feeling that really all is well. All is well. Your turn.
We've got all of the tools that we need, except for a new guy. So, so that's the assignment for this week, is to find one new guy, because that's really the proof of the pudding, isn't it? Is to have somebody to work with. What an opportunity it is for somebody to invite you into their life at the level of trusting you to help them get connected to the recovery program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think that's sacred ground. I do pray for the people that I sponsor by name every morning, so that if there is something that's out of whack, I trust that I will get directed by prayer, because I don't have a formula for sponsoring either. Each experience is a totally separate, different thing. Other than that, we use the same format. We start with the first step, but I know that body, mind, and spirit all need to be addressed. I was sick in my body and in my mind and in my spirit all together, not just alcohol. There's a lot more going on than that. The doctor's opinion was critical to my beginning to understand that I am bodily different from a non-alcoholic person. Why? Who cares? That, it isn't going away. And Mac, my first sponsor, always said, if people ask you if you want a drink, and you just say to them, "No thanks, I don't drink normally." And that's the God's truth, So that was really helpful, Tommie, 1, 2, and 3. So the doctor's opinion, more about alcoholism, and Bill's story. And when we start going through Bill's story, I was taught early on to not turn the page until I could find myself on that page. And that's been a really helpful practice for me for the rest of the whole Big Book experience. I'm on every page, and now I can find myself, and sometimes it's a whole different place on that page that I find myself, but I'm on every page, and to make it my own experience, that's what I do, is make sure that I have found myself on that page, and before I turn it. So the doctor's opinion for the physical, more about alcoholism, the 3rd chapter, because boy, my case is covered in there, and then Bill's story, and I beginning the whole process of learning to identify. And then we're on to taking an inventory. You know how long it takes to write a 4-step inventory? 3 years and an evening. I heard that, and I thought, son of a gun. The whole time process that I was involved in was postponing it. It's not that big of a deal once you get a pencil. And we're very fortunate to have specific directions. And my sponsor, Marceline, was always a stickler for this. It's just read the black parts. And but really, it is a matter of just meeting the conditions, and it really is. And an inventory, just draw the lines, and we've got good examples about how to go about it, and fill in the blanks. But also reading again and again and again what the book how it describes resentments and fear, an evil and corrosive thread. The fabric of our lives was shot through with it. Some of the language in the book is so compelling. A resentment. I always thought a resentment just existed in my head. It was just something I thought. It just will take over my life. And the whole thing of cutting me off from the sunlight of the Spirit, that's just what it does. But we have a solution. That's one of my best favorite things to even think about, is we have a solution. Fact-finding, fact-facing, myself, spiritual disease, a spiritual malady. And what am I afraid of? Interfered with. Our grudge list. It's not that big horrendous thing that I thought it was either. It just seemed like such an extreme thing to do until you read where it says that the bulk of the resentment list is about, in most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore. We were burned up. I got my feelings hurt. And now that I'd like to say that was the worst of it. The worst of it was that I would carry that for 12, 14, 20 years, festering. And that's what a resentment is, I think. And if I ever want to even entertain the possibility of getting well, I have to be willing to set aside and meet the conditions and expose my sickness to this recovery process. Just follow the directions. 4 and then 5. I've had very good results or experiences with the 5th step, doing them and hearing them. I've done a number of them. The first one didn't have sex on there at all because I thought that was in bad taste. I'm not kidding you. I didn't. You shouldn't talk about stuff like that. So, and I was a little put out when I was asked about it. Like, where's the sex inventory? Please. I didn't get it. I just didn't get it. I was helped a great deal. The next thing that was missing on my first inventory was the 4th column. What do you mean 4 columns? There's 3 columns, 1, 2, 3. But then it says we turned the page. And it changed my life. Up until the time that I turned the page, I was such a victim. Nothing was my fault. And I see that today in the women's prison is the most dramatic place where I see it. It's either the judge or the lawyer or the boyfriend, but it's not my fault. And we have a saying that I like is, if it isn't one thing, it's your mother, But it's never. It was never nothing was my fault. It was. If you hadn't said this, I would never have done that. If you didn't do this, I wouldn't have said that. Whatever. It was always somebody else's fault. And that 4th column in the inventory, and that's what I'm fishing for right now. Who knows what page that's on? Anybody? But it's where it all turned around for me. It wasn't anybody else's fault anymore. 3, 4, okay. I'm on page 67. Referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done. And then this is another practice that I learned. It says we, but I put I, because this is me now. This is not just some remote thing that I'm, like a novel that I'm reading. This is about me getting well. This is the directions for the 4th column. I resolutely looked for my own mistakes. Where had I been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. This isn't his inventory. This is mine. And it's about what I did. I either started it, or I participated in it, or I benefited from it, I kept it going, but it somehow or another, it involved me, and that's the part that I got to get to, and see how I operate. And it was pretty interesting, and that was the benefit of an inventory. A guy I knew in Chicago always used to say, the cuckoo who's on to himself is halfway out of the clock. You begin to catch on. You begin to say, oh, geez, it didn't start with her. It didn't start with him. It's me. I had an expectation. I planned to use this person or whatever. But it's catching on to ourselves and exposing ourselves and getting the hang of what's really going on. And it absolutely changed my life. It changed how I listen to the news. If I hear about some drunk that ran into a crowd of people, and instead of saying, oh, ain't it awful, I think, oh, dear God, I could have done that 100 times. But, and I also, I'm hurt for the people, and I'm hurt for their families, but I'm also hurt for the guy that was driving the car. I don't just blame everybody anymore. It was me. And that's alcoholism. That's not how he wanted his day to go either. You know, it's alcoholism. And instead of feeling better than somebody, I just need to feel more indebted to carry this message so that maybe another drunk will be off the road. Where was I to blame? The inventory was mine. Our wrongs, we admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to set these matters right. Just seeing where I either started it or I kept the ball rolling if I didn't start it, and perpetuated all these things. Just finding my part. And that's kind of a funny thing to say because that's implying that the other guy had a part, and I'm not sure that that's really accurate. But I just got to find what was going on with me in each and every one of the resentments and in the fears and in the sex conduct, which doesn't have all that much to do with sex, actually. It has to do with how I treated people and how I used people and how I would today if I didn't catch on, because that's how I operate. Just reviewing our conduct over the years. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where was I at fault? And what should I have done instead? You know what one of the things I discovered in the sex inventory was there's not a lot of thou shalt nots in AA. You got to come to some kind of an agreement with God, like discovering what my real moral values are and being willing to live up to them with God's help. Not, that's what I got out of it. It doesn't have so much specific directions or venial, and it's not so much a system of beliefs, but a coming to believe that we don't hurt people and that we come to discover what my true core values are and being willing to live up to them. And doing it again, by asking God again and again prayerfully the right thing to do, we begin to discover, or I have begun to discover what my real values are, what I really believe. It's tougher to manage that way. I always wanted just a little checklist kind of thing that would be easier for me to operate with. But, and the road gets narrower. These things change. I think that the concept of coming to believe and God as I understand him, today is different from what it was when I came in, and different than what it was at 10 years or 20 years. The road does get narrower. I was able to live with some things 10 years ago that I couldn't live with today. It doesn't seem right anymore. So by keeping active, those things change. I've had great experiences with taking a fifth step with other people who have been good and kind enough to share with me, and I've gotten wonderful help that way. And so I do that when I hear a fifth step, is share things that I think might be helpful to that person. But it's all done so prayerfully and trusting. 6 and 7, that'll be easy, right? It's only about that big, but in the book. Well, turns out it's really not, is it? But those are, I think that those are evolving things as well. That it comes to have more meaning over and over and over again, and letting go of the fears.
Let me just
The
ask
seventh-step
John.
prayer?
Just let me ask John when he wants to break.
Sure.
10 minutes or so.
Okay.
Whatever good for you guys, man.
Okay.
Great. You know, not all of the steps are say this is the third step. You know, they're incorporated in a way, but easy to discover. But they're all in here in different formats. But the third step prayer and the seventh step prayer are carefully, you know, they're even in the squiggly writing to get our attention and stuff. While you're here today, if any of you don't feel as though you've really done a third step prayer, you just grab a hold of somebody else and go out around the corner or something and kneel down and take a third step prayer together. Make sure, you know, because that's not the third step. The third step is your decision. But in order to kind of officially know that you've done it with somebody, that's a really moving practice for some people. It's a big deal for some people. It's a big deal for all of us, but there are different levels, and today might be the day where you could have an experience with that. Grab Tommie or me, and we'll go around the corner with you and take a third step prayer together. We'll read it out of the book. You write or you do your own third step between you and God. But when you want to take one with somebody, so that you won't get all fancy and try to impress them with a big flowery prayer or something, just read the one in the book together. Because, you know, that's just officially making your intent known. And we're always doubting ourselves anyways. Did I really take the whole third step, you know? Well, yeah, you can. You're in the process, but officially you can take a third step prayer with anybody else here today. And the seventh step prayer, isn't that a marvel? The good and the bad? Because I can't tell the difference sometimes, so I'll give them the whole deal. You know, that's a wonderful prayer. And it's nice to read that prayer with somebody else officially, too, while we're here today. You could get that done.
You're done. So maybe we could take a break and then come back, and that'll be 8, 9. You did 8 and 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay.
Come back at 11.
11.
15 minutes, yeah.
Okay.
We'll synchronize our watches.
Yeah. Very good.
That is just lovely of you to do. I have it on different things, but that's beautiful. And it's protected. Thank you very much. That's so kind and thoughtful. Oh, thank you. Thank you, dear. Yeah, I do, thanks. But I'll come out. Get off the carpet.
I'll tell you a neat story. I have one of those small pocket, 164 pages.
Yeah.
And Scott was taking me through the steps after my second cigar. And wouldn't go anywhere without it. So I was speaking at Mountain Man, which we have up the road. And after I was done, I had this old Jeep. I couldn't find my keys. I put the book on top of the car. 40 miles an hour. Drove home. Drove 50 miles to D.C. the next morning. No, pouring rain. I'm going to the noon meeting with my friend. I said, where's my book? I left it at that treatment center. I go walk by the car, and there it is, the leather part. It was a little kind of leather one, and stuck in the back of the roof rack, and was all wadded up like a week-old newspaper out in the rain, just sitting there. It was all, and so I said, oh, so I got it, and each page I pressed, and I put it under a brick for about a month. I showed it to my mom. And so after reading it, it's like I went through this section. I noticed page 69 is not there. The sex inventory. So I called God and listen, this is an act of God. I don't have to do the sex inventory.
You could make a good case for that. Incredible. Now, what does that mean? I'm not sure, but it's something really, that is a significant thing. I love it. Oh,
I thought nobody did any of that sexual stuff like I did. I can't tell everybody.
Certainly.
John, do you have that movie?
they asked me, and I said, I would never write a book because people believe the written word, and it would be my memory. I do have a 4-set CD that Scott Lee and his wife Linda in Tennessee invited me to their home for a weekend. And there were like about 60 of us spent the weekend together, and I just talked. So there are 4 CDs. So I've got CDs that are my memories. I just wouldn't write a book.
I'm a historian, so that's when I started listening to you talk. I almost started taking notes. Like, no, she's gonna think I'm great. But both of you have saved my life. I just listening to you, absorbing, so good. Just listening to you. You are truly a friend, and an honor to say hi to you.
Thank you.
By the way, you do look like you belong in the lawn. You look amazing. You looked amazing last night. I'm trying to keep her out of trouble, eh?
No, it's more fun this way.
I knew I liked you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Tom. My name's Tom. Tommie. So nice to meet you. Sharing your time with us. I get so, there's such a connection when I hear something like, oh, I love this movie. I said, man, so, I understand. But I appreciate it because that's all we have. You know, I've been around a little while. And I have an aunt who's down in Florida. She's been around about 36 years. She's near, she was on okay. She goes into auctions for years, the treasurer for the big conventions down there. So, and Randy, Matt, she came in for the first one in our family. I'm one of 12 kids, so 5 of us got several kids. 12. 4 of us are still alive. One passed away, so very, very I'm so glad. I've lost 2 brothers since mom passed first.
If everybody can get started, everybody get seated, we're gonna get started in another minute or so.
excuse me.
Yeah, no, I'm at that point too, with the balance and the vision. The vision.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I just spoke with somebody outside too.
Thank you. Thank you. We are blessed.
Yes,
We're blessed, Chris. That's for sure.
My name is John. I'm an alcoholic. Just real quick again, I'm going to pass the baskets now, not for the traditional purposes, but I'm going to pass the basket, and please put your question that you want to ask in it, and we'll also have them up there during the break afterwards when we break for lunch. So I'm going to pass those baskets, and I'm going to turn it back over to Tommie and Mary Jane for another hour, and then we'll break for lunch.
It's John.
Can you hear this? No, I guess the battery.
Yeah, it didn't sound.
Now is it? There we are. Okay. It didn't want to go green. Steps 8 and 9. Step 8, we made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. We already had the list, but I don't know about you. My list was huge. All of a sudden I got to there, well, it was all my fault. And a lot of those names came off. And then others went on. So all that is making a list and becoming willing to make amends to them all. It doesn't say we have to rush right out and make the amend. We become willing to make the amend, to see who we had hurt. It's interesting because in the fourth column of the fifth step, the word "my part" is not in that. It says, where were my mistakes? Where had I been wrong? And I always used to think it said, for years, probably 49 and a half years. I don't know. I thought it said what was my parts, indicating, like Mary Jane said, he had a part in it. Well, he had a big part in it, obviously, you know. But no, that word's not even in there. Why are we doing these steps? Why do we experience the steps? It says our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. That's a biggie. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. I didn't think I could be of any service to anybody, let alone to God. And to try to find myself by trying to help other people. It was all an ego thing for me in the beginning. Ninth step. And I love what, in the eighth step, it's also in italics. Remember, it was agreed at the beginning we would go to any length for victory over alcohol. How long it takes, and it takes these steps and the series of the steps. I used to kind of hodgepodge, do potpourri, and do first, and probably my second month of sobriety, I went to my husband and told him how sorry I was, and he said, you ought to be. I almost drank. I thought And the 9th step says, made direct amend to such people wherever possible. And here's the kicker, except when to do so would injure them or others. The 9th step is not about apology. It's not about saying I'm sorry. It says made direct amends, which means change in my dictionary. To put the onus on me. Now, when I slept with somebody else's husband, I wasn't going to go tell her. That's for sure. So it does call for being discreet. If you're going to hurt your families and somebody else directly, it suggests that we pause. I've heard people say, well, I don't go to a lot of those people because it might hurt them, so I'll just stay sober. I don't think that does it. This step says made amends to that person. Now, if they've already died, now what do I do? It was suggested that we write a letter. Get it on paper, because we write letters for ourselves anyhow. It's never for the recipient, it's for ourselves. Write a letter, even if they're still alive. And for whatever reason you can't go to them, write a letter. Don't put a return address on it. Just write the letter. Don't use it as an excuse, though, because can we rationalize that. And put it in the mail. And it can go to the dead letter office. And nobody will get it, but you've done an act of making the amend. Other people have written a letter and then read it to me, and then we burned it because she was unable, the person had died. But we still need to make the amend. It took me a long time to realize we're experiencing these steps inside of us for our recovery from a fatal illness. So even though the steps are suggested, I remember the first time I heard there were a lot of you betters. And I think that's so important because we are recovering from a fatal illness of mind, body, and spirit. And so those steps are very, very, very important. When I finally got to the 9th step and made an amend to my husband, I can't even tell you what his reaction was, but I know I felt better. And that took about 46 years. I had totally forgotten a particular incident, and I guess God was protecting me from that because I was not yet willing to deal with something that had happened in my life. And it took that long for God to say, okay, Tommie, it's time. And he revealed it to me. And I'll tell you, there was a newfound freedom at somewhere around, I don't know, I know it was over 40 years because Charlie died in 2003. So it was probably around 2000, 2001. I was sober close to 40 years by that time. And it's interesting, I would have told you that at 7 years, I had completed all the amends I ever needed to make, because I really felt that. But another 30 years passed when this came to me, and I had talked it over with a very dear friend of mine, and she said, I said, well, he's out in Connecticut, I'm in Michigan. She said, something will happen, and God will take care of it. And she said, the equinox is coming up, where the days and the nights are the same length. And for some reason, that was a very spiritual time for her. And she said, that's next Thursday. And she said, I have a feeling that God will arrange all this. Just make yourself available. I was then in Connecticut. Charlie had remarried and was with his second wife. And all of a sudden, the two of us were in the living room. And I thought, boy, Kathleen, you sure know what you're talking about. And there was my privilege, I will say. I used to say it was an opportunity. But there was my privilege to make my amend to Charlie for my behavior in my early marriage to him, or my early recovery to him, and just before I got sober. So when we are tuned in, when that surrender has happened through the third step, and we start implementing these steps inside of me, where I should say where my alcoholism is, that's where I have to do it, inside of me. Not just in my behavior outside, but inside of me where my disease is. Things begin to happen. And we get to this point where, gosh, I am so excited to be a human being, and I'm wondering what's going to happen next, that I'm going to discover something more about me. And I truly believe that we are all born with everything we're ever going to know. I didn't come to AA and then you put me in a people bank and started pushing honesty and truth and newfound knowledge. You hear that, we peel off the layers of the onion. And I really believe that's what happened, because more is being revealed. We've hunted all over AA literature, books, to find out where that word is. More will be revealed. It's not there. But the closest we can come to is that top paragraph on page 164, where God will show us whatever it says exactly. We may get to it before the end of today. I don't know. But it's amazing if we make the commitment to not drink and start the journey, the steps inside of us, where I used to put the alcohol. We find ourselves, and that's so exciting. And how did I learn that? You shared it with me. So it's unbelievable. Well, I can share a little bit about the 10th step. You can do 11 and 12. Sure. Okay. Like we said in the beginning, we didn't know. Did you know when you got sober what was going to happen to you? Yeah, same thing now. It's just like when I stopped drinking. I never know where I'm going to end up. Who would think I'd ever be in Fredrick, Maryland? It's incredible. Absolutely. 10th step. Where are we? Continue to take, I can't find it right now. Continue to take personal inventory. And when we were wrong, promptly admit it. That promptly was amazing to me, because who wanted to say, no, I know, I didn't want to say I was wrong. For years it had been his fault, her fault, its fault in my emotional immaturity, and I'd had to grow up enough to put the focus on myself. I've questioned over the years, is it like another 4th step? I don't think so anymore. Once I really experienced the 4th step, got that down, and shared that in the 5th step, the 10th step says continue to take personal inventory. And when wrong, not when I was wrong, when wrong, promptly admit it. That is taking the inventory at night when I go to bed. In the 11th step, it talks about on retiring, and then when I get up in the morning on awakening. I could never figure out, why do they put on retiring first? I get up first. I can't retire until I get up. And it was very confusing to me for a long time. Well, then it occurred to me, some wise person in AA said, if you're taking your inventory as you're going to bed and you get that cleared up, you start the day in a better position. You're finishing the day. Now, I had heard early on in AA, don't go to bed and have anything hang over, still hanging. Finish the day. Otherwise, you're going to take it right into the next day and start the day with all of that. And so I finally realized on retiring was really part of the 10th step. Where had I been short with somebody? Where had I really imposed my will? Where was I flat out wrong? Not very often, I used to say. Gosh, isn't this some program to help us grow up? And so sometimes I could admit it, but not all the time. I just didn't want to reveal too much of me. I didn't want to get well too soon, that kind of thing. But it is such a relieving freedom. When I've really experienced these steps in the order in which they were written down, there has been a sense of freedom that is beyond me. One of my greatest gifts is being able to listen to what people say. And I have to tell you a story. This lady woke me up once, a few times. And I used to say with Bill at Ebby's funeral, I'd say, Bill, did it ever occur to you that if Abby hadn't given the grace to stay sober, that you would have? And Mary Jane reminded me, and I since have changed that story. If it were up to God's grace, everybody would get sober. We don't think that God picks you and you and you and you and you, and maybe you, me. No. If God did it, he'd do it for everybody. And so I've changed that to, Bill, do you think I could change it with Bill because he's long gone, but when I tell the story now, I will say, do you think that if Ebby had stayed sober that you would have? Because it was in Bill trying to 12-step Ebby that Bill discovered himself. And that to me is one of the classic examples that, thank God, I can listen when somebody cares enough to point out, to have me look at the same thing in a little different way. And that to me is one of the biggest assets I have in this fellowship. When somebody will say to me, take a look at this, what do you think? And that's what Mary Jane did for me, among other things she's done for me, but I'll give her credit for that right now. So the 10-step is very important to me. It removes that sneaking around the corner, avoiding people. As long as I don't do it to hurt them, really. In front of other people, it's just been a remarkable journey for me, coming to know myself enough that I want to live with me some more. And that's one of the greatest gifts, being able to live with a person I drank to get away from. Wow. And to do God's grace, do God's will, what I believe is my responsibility to fit myself to be of maximum service to the God of my understanding and to others about me. Your turn.
I'm going to step back a minute and then make a run. But, I just wanted to, I've got a couple of copies of this 8th Step article that the same guy, Don P. from Denver, wrote, because he got sober in prison. And if you can do a 9th step in prison, why can't we do it, you know? I think that's extreme, but he was able to begin to get free. And Tommie was, when Tommie said the word freedom, it really struck me. Just a week or so ago, when I was at the women's meeting there, a girl actually said out loud something that I've thought for a long time. Sometimes people who are locked up feel freer because they're safer in prison. And she actually said that. She said, you know, I feel safer in here. I'm freer in here. But Don P. got sober in prison and then started working the recovery program in prison. And he was saying, he gave me the key to freedom, this sponsor that he had in prison. I was to close my eyes and picture each person separately in front of me. I was to look each straight in the eye and see if I could feel a willingness to say, I have been wrong and have caused you harm. Will you please tell me what I must do so that we can get the books to balance? Because I think a lot of people think that it's a matter of saying, I'm sorry, or stuff. But I think prayerfully to look the guy in the eye and say, how can I make this right? I know I harmed you. And take the responsibility and do whatever he says. And I found this pretty helpful, but it can be done anywhere. And you know, if you happen to be locked up, that's where you can start. So I'm going to leave that, and maybe you guys may want to make some copies or something, but if you like, or just take a look. The whole business of making amends was a real, once again, a real life changer for me. And then 10, I was talking to somebody last night about how do you ever have to write a 4th step again, or do you just use 10? The answer for me is yes and no. I don't have a short answer for that. Here's the thing. Are you looking for loopholes? You know? Or should you really do another whole 4th step? Sometimes, yes. That's really what should be done. Sometimes you're just going to write and write and write and write, because then you don't ever have to do anything about that. You know? And so in that case, it's a matter of just 10. Which is no simple thing either. I don't mean to say that that's the light version, because it's not. It's important. It's significant. That's the entrance to the world of the Spirit, it says. It says we continued to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear when these crop up, not if. I find comfort in that. You know, the guys are saying, it's not over, it's never over. The shelling has stopped, but it's never over. And, you know, just every day, you know, I find myself doing appalling things today. And it is very disappointing. And I really don't want to tell anybody about it either, you know. But so there's no end in sight. But don't cheat yourself by negotiating for a lesser sentence, you know. I'll just so I think that sometimes it is just a matter. Sometimes we have a tendency to make a big deal out of something that's nothing. Sometimes we take a big deal and try and make nothing out of it. So willingness and it's all in here too. It really is. Step 11, I'm having wonderful new experiences with periodically. I always thought prayer and meditation was in the sky and clouds and rainbows and crystals, and I get it's way more practical for me today. I love the whole thing of unawakening and when we retire at night, just because I think it covers all the bases. And if I use those as a real prescription for me, and I printed it all out so that I have little copies of it that I carry around with me. It's portable. And that was one of my earliest concerns when I came to AA. If I leave town, will I still be safe? And Mac, my first sponsor, when he gave me the 24-hour book, he wrote in the beginning of it, "This is for you, it's portable." I didn't know that either. Would it be okay if I, because I needed to make a living and I had to travel around. And it has proven to be most portable. It is very portable. It works all over the world. But I like having the directions, the specific instructions. I feel very safe in reading exactly what it says in the 11th step. And it really, it sounds kind of fluffy when you think about just prayer and meditation and all that. That's how it was for me, but I have found that it's infinitely specifically practical. And so I read it. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness and watch for those things, and when they occur, we turn in prayer. We turn our thoughts to someone we can help. If I can get out of my head, I've got a way better chance of not screwing up any worse for the rest of that day. So to turn and every place in the book that it talks about, if we find sex to be especially troublesome, it says, who could we help? That's the only thing that gives us some relief from most of the problems that are specifically described. How to get out of myself. If I can for a minute or two think about somebody else's welfare or be concerned for somebody new, or the phone rings, even when I don't have it going for me, somebody calls up and I can, and I don't want to, you know. The one that comes to my mind right this minute is a lady who, when I was in upstate New York, I went to this meeting because I was looking for a sponsor. I needed a sponsor. I needed a lot of help. Don had joined this community, and here I was in upstate New York. The big book was just a rumor. And I called Marceline to tell her about them too. They didn't even have big books, and you know. So she says, "Well, you go back next week and be sure you bring your book," you know. So, but I went to this meeting because I was looking for a sponsor and I was hoping to get some help because I needed a lot of help. This girl came up to me and said, would I sponsor her? I thought, oh, gee. Listen, lady, I got a lot of problems, you know. And she was on the lam from New York. She had run off with this man, and she took her 3 kids with her, and so I started to think, well, yeah, she really does have some problems there, doesn't she? I said, okay, all right, okay, but I'm not sure what we ought to do, but I'll come to you. You come to my house every Tuesday, and we'll go through the book, because that's all I knew to do. And she says, well, I got these 3 kids. I said, okay, I'll come to your house. I said, but we're not going to talk about curtains and peanut butter. You know, we're going to get after it. Is that agreeable to you? Are you willing to do all this? She said, yeah, I am, in this funny British accent. So I said, okay. And you know what? Now she's another lady that I sponsor moved down to Myrtle Beach and goes to the same meeting as she does now. This is like 20-some years later. All those 3 kids have gotten through college. One of them went through West Point, and that lady's still sober. And here's the thing. It helped Jerry a lot, but it helped me to get out of myself. I get so self-absorbed and that my problems are so significant. And geez, what do you want from me? You know? 'Cause I give and I give and I give. Is there no rest, you know? But what a blessing it is when you have something meaningful to do, and it does get you out of your own self. But I see again and again and again, the answer always is not in going off to meditate about something. It's seeing where I can be useful or helpful to somebody else to get to the meeting early. And the whole business of carrying this message and finding ways to be helpful has to do with finding somebody. Terry just walked out, but we have a mutual friend, a buddy named Kevin up in Rhode Island. Kevin was sponsoring a new guy, and the new guy came to the meeting and he said, "Hey, Kevin, why didn't you call me this week?" Kevin says, "I don't want what you have." The thing is, it's not Kevin's job to call the new guy. It's the new guy's job to call Kevin, you know. But you know, it's a very good thing every once in a while. If nobody has asked me to sponsor them in a very long time, it's a good time for me to say, doesn't anybody want what I have? And maybe I need to take a look at how I'm acting. Another one of my tip-offs is, if I'm at odds with more than 3 people, it may be me, you know? Because every once in a while I'll hear myself saying to somebody, "Oh, she's a nut. He's nuts. She's crazy." You know, and I think, whoa. You know? When I was working, I used to have that as my checklist. If I got on the elevator and there was something the matter with everybody in the elevator, by the time I got off, I knew it was me. I knew it was me. You know? And if you look around and you find that there's something the matter with a lot of the people that you know real well, it may be time to take a good look again, you know. But we have to find people to work with, and I don't get to just wait at home for somebody to plead with me. You know, I have to be there. My name has to be on the list down at the central office. How else am I going to get a 12-step call? How do they know who I am? So my name is on the list down at the central office and also at the intergroup office. And that's the first thing. And talk about that at my home group. A lot of groups will give their whole group list to the central office or to the intergroup office to have. And if they can't reach one, it's harder and harder. If you're working on the desk at intergroup, it's harder and harder to find somebody these days because everybody's got cell phones and answering machines and stuff like that. And very, very often you just get a recording, and you can't leave it at that. You know, I've got somebody that I need for you to pick up for a meeting at 7. You can't trust that they get that message, so you got to keep calling people until you can finally connect with a real person. So they need way more names, and it usually boils down to just a few regulars, trusted people that you can that you know you can always depend on, and they'll drop everything and they'll go. And that's a great thing. But at any rate, that's one of the ways to make sure that there's you know, we got to do our part, make ourselves available. And like I said, get into the meeting early and visit with the people. And if there's somebody there who you haven't seen before, make sure that you talk to them. Make sure at my home group that nobody ever leaves there without being spoken to individually. And are they new in the area? Do they need a meeting schedule? Just make a contact, a connection. Because lots of times I'm going thinking, you know, well, nobody talked to me today, you know. Well, reach out my own hand. It's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. Whew. Isn't that the truth? We're headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. Is everybody familiar with these parts on page 86 and 87 about on awakening and when we retire at night, and about all through the day when we pause, when we're agitated or distressed or upset? Just stop what you're doing and take a break out and kind of get back to sane. All through the day, a prayer that we will be shown all through the day what our next step is to be, that we be given whatever we need to take care of such problems. Isn't that better than just blowing our top and just flipping out and being nuts? As we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. We constantly remind ourselves we're no longer running the show. Thy will be done. Over and over, thy will be done. I learned that, Bill Wilson had a lot of trouble with depression, and I have had a lot of problems with it as well. I looked up, as Bill sees it, under depression, some of the things that he tried. One of them was he would just make himself walk, putting one foot in front of the other, just making himself do it. Because otherwise you just want to sit there and die from the inside out. It's all black anyways. I started trying to do that. Then I heard about repetitive prayer, constant repetitive prayer. It's an ancient practice that people have used for years. Our book says, be quick to make use of practices that have, better people than we have tried all these things. Make use of it if it's helpful for you. I started using repetitive prayer. The one that you hear most often is the Jesus prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. And you say it over and over and over and over. And while you're driving, while you're peeling carrots, whatever, just, where I say it? Is at a business meeting. And when I hear somebody talking stupid, I'm sitting there going, because inside I'm saying, inside I'm just sitting there saying, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. They don't know that. And I'm not making faces at them. So repetitive prayer mixed with making one foot go in front of the other and just pushing myself out the door, the two together seem just perfect. And it's the breathing. Breathe in and breathe out. And the Jesus prayer kind of made me a little goofy. So I do the thy kingdom come, thy will be done, over and over and over. It was explained to me that if I would work for the prayer will work for me. And today, when my butt hits the chair in the dentist office, the prayer starts up. It just starts up. If I have a close call in traffic, the prayer starts up. And that's what was explained to me. And today I believe that it's just, it's not a trick anymore. It's just salvation for me. It keeps me in a better place to repetitive prayer. And that's what it says in our book. We sought, I'm seeking through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact with God as I understand Him. Praying only for the knowledge of His will for me and the power to carry that out. It's not a matter of my telling God what He needs to do anymore. I really don't pray for stuff, even personal stuff. It's a matter of God knows how to be God. I really believe that. And it's a matter of my trying to attune myself with His will. If I can, and sometimes I don't know what His will for me is, but I know what He wouldn't want me doing. Lots of times that's easy, So at least I can quit doing what I'm doing. But the repetitive prayer, if that's useful for you, I hope you give it a shot. It's been enormously helpful for me in so many different ways. And so that's part of my 11th-step practice. And 12, of course, carrying this message. What a privilege, what an opportunity, what a responsibility. Looking for people to be helpful to and getting out of self. Practicing these principles. How do you? I asked a guy that I knew one time who I thought was the world's champion 12-stepper, how he learned how to do that, because I marveled at what he was able to do. This was in Texas, and his name was Bob White, and he was just bigger than life, and people were drawn to him. And he called all the guys cowboy, and he called all the girls sugar, and he's just a wonderful man. And but I asked him how he knew how to go about carrying this message, and he said, "You just practice." That's what it says, and you get good at it because you're not so nervous anymore. You're not so self-conscious. You try and perceive what this person needs today. And most often they just need something to hang on to. Linda is one who talks about the slogans. First things first, let go and let God. She calls them sometimes they're the handrails. You're not in a good place to work on the steps that day because you're up to your butt in alligators. But you can hang on to the handrails. Just the little easy does-its, the little handy tips, that whole Living Sober book. It doesn't say on the cover of the Living Sober book, you can bet the farm on this book. It just says, these are just handy tips, just stuff to hang on to until, you can get back to being sane and working with somebody and going back to the book. So just hanging on sometimes. And but I think that the whole thing, Dr. Bob's last message, the whole thing boils down to love and service. And we all know what love is, and we all know what service is. It's not that big of a mystery. A lot of it is so amazingly simple if we do. And the people in Nashville have a little habit, too, of reading 2 pages of the book every day. Not 4 pages, not 1 page, 2 pages. There's a discipline to that. And of course, they've got it all figured out. Do you? I think that's wonderful. You want to talk about that, Tommie? Hey, that's great.
I read 2 pages every day. I have a little magnet book back here. Right now I'm on Jimmy Burwell's story.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me.
And he's a local guy.
Yeah.
Jimmy Burwell is God as I understand him. Was a real close friend of Bill's and is buried in Maryland in the same cemetery as Fitzmayo and some of those older guys. And Tommie actually served at the General Service Conference with his wife, Rosa Burwell. Mm-hmm. So isn't that thrilling to you guys that these are real people? They're real people. They were regular people. They screwed up. They were drunks. And they came through the other end and continue to inspire us 75 years later. Jeez. But I think that's a wonderful practice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You were talking about how do we sponsor? The preamble says we share our experience, strength, and hope. It's that simple. People have said, well, I can't sponsor, I'm not sober long enough. Bill Wilson was 6 months sober when he met Dr. Bob. I'm glad he didn't say that. He had his experience, his strength, and his hope up to that time. And that's how he gained more experience, strength, and hope, by sharing what he had. So I don't think anybody is too new. If we're asked, then somebody wants what they think we had. when I met my sponsor, I wanted what she had. I didn't know what it was, but I wanted it. And remarkable changes happened in my life. Well, anyhow, are we supposed to break at noon? And okay, and we'll be back at 1 o'clock. Okay.
Great. Thank you.